Okay, so I'll address something real quick first. The theme in the beginning of the video is the Doctor Strange theme from Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I know a lot of times I put music clips in videos and people always ask me what they are, and I don't remember because I have a giant music library and I just pull clips in and I don't remember what song is what all the time, especially since most of them are, you know, one-off like theme songs or something from a certain character of a certain game. So there you go. If you wanted to get that song, it's a pretty good song. The entire Marvel vs. Capcom 3 soundtrack is pretty good. But let's get on to why you're here, and that is the review of the Onyx blade. Now, a lot of you guys, if you have been with me for a long time, know that I tried out a hex build a little while ago. It was kind of fun to use, but it wasn't really so effective in PvP 1v1 duels. It just didn't have, you know, the damage output. Even though it had a lot of different unique kind of tools, the game itself, the mechanics of the game just didn't lend itself to really having this character be that competitive or that useful at a soul level 120 meta. However, thanks to From Software and the release of the DLCs, one of the things that they've definitely done is introduce some new mechanics and new weapons that really help to make this build a lot more viable than it used to be before the DLC. And while there is a lot of components that go into a hex build, and I'll probably review this entire build in general in a video later on, but what I'm going to focus on mostly in this video is the Onyx blade. Now, what you can see right off the bat as to what I'm doing with this weapon is it's usually always going to be buffed with the weapon art. Now, I'll talk about that in a little bit, but that weapon art is something that 100% is always useful, no matter what. Unlike some other great swords, which again we'll talk about a little bit later. However, what makes this sword really shine, in my opinion, is the sheer length of the sword. The damage is great, which also kind of couples with the length, but the length of the sword allows you to really combat harder matchups where the hex build would just get absolutely destroyed in previous matches. In these past two clips, the guy I'm facing here is using a katana, and you can see, you know, he's playing the katana fairly correctly in my opinion, right? If you've watched my frayed blade video, the thing you want to do with the katana is control space. This guy is keeping him at a medium range, and he's using those weapon arts and the running R1 attacks to close the space down. I'm not really getting in close enough for him to utilize just the regular R1s or the R2s, and if he does do that, I can punish him with my greatsword. And the reason is because I don't need to get in close because this sword has such great range. When he tries to come in with attacks on me with that katana, I can whip out my R1 or even my thrusted R2, and because the sword again is so long, the thrusted R2, just the standard charge R2 attack, has insane amounts of range, and you can punish people from really far distances, a lot further than you could with other great swords. And believe it or not, that little, you know, small, seemingly unimportant note of this greatsword does make a huge difference in making this sword one of the best greatswords in the game right now, and probably the best, if, you know, well, yeah, I guess I could say the best weapon for hex users, in my opinion. I mean, there might be some more. I got some more weapons to try out, like the Mad King glaive type weapon, and experiment a little bit more with that Demon Scar. But like I said, I'll do a complete review of a hex character as the game is now completed in terms of its DLC releases, and we'll see just how viable it is overall. But my initial impressions, very, very good. You can see here this guy was trying to close the space on me really quickly. We charged the R2. He couldn't get his parry off, and the damage, absolutely insane. We just absolutely annihilated that matchup very, very quick. So, first thing, the length of the weapon. Very, very good. And coupled with the damage that it can output, makes this weapon even more deadly. One of the main drawbacks of a hex character was that you relied a lot on spells and kind of like gimmicks, I guess you could even say, to really control the matchup. But if an opponent was being so aggressive on you, you didn't really have too many options to stop that aggression. Well, with a very powerful and long greatsword, you definitely have that ability. There again, you can see I saw him trying to close the space on me, and I whipped out that R1, the massive amount of range on it. If he was even just a little bit further from me, I probably would have still hit him and killed him. So way before he was going to be able to start up any attack with his katanas, I was going to close out the distance and kill him. What's also nice about this sword, you can see this matchup is a really good example. This guy is using, I think, is the Astora's Greatsword, which is an Ultra Greatsword. Does decent amount of damage. It was recently nerfed, but you know, Ultra Greatswords in general have been buffed as a class to be a little bit quicker. Nonetheless though, one of the main things with Ultra Greatswords is you definitely want to avoid the trade when you go up against them. right? They do more damage, they're heavier weapons, they have hyper armor, more hyper armor frames and smaller weapons. However, with this Onyx blade, because it does almost as much, if not more, than some greatswords in terms of damage, and the length is almost comparable to an ultra weapon at times, you don't have to worry about that. And so it matches up with ultra weapons and shorter weapons. So with katanas, you can control the space a little bit more and prevent katana users from, using those ranged attacks to close you down and dictate the pace of the match. You can contest with ultra weapons because you don't necessarily have to fear the trades all too much. Greatswords do have some hyper armor, but they can definitely hold their own against ultra weapons in the damage department and the length department, so you don't have to worry about those punishes all the time. And this weapon really does help close the gap on some of the deficiencies with greatswords in general, in my personal opinion. And because it's unique to being, used with a hex character, essentially, you're not really going to use it outside of that, it really adds a lot of diversity, even though it doesn't seem like it, but it really does in my opinion. When you look at the details of matchups and where the hex character would struggle before, it fills a lot of those gaps, is what I'm trying to say, and it makes this build a lot more viable from that standpoint. And you can see in these matches, right, we are now keeping opponents on their front foot. We're the ones that are rushing down and controlling space. I tried to be a little bit cheeky there and finish him off with the weapon art like I did in the beginning clip, but I was a little too far away. And like I said, I will do a complete breakdown of the Hex class, because this greatsword, while it does do a really good job in again, closing down those deficiencies with the Hex build and greatswords in general, the other utilities that are available to a Hex character definitely kind of complete the package, I guess you can say, for a Hex character, and definitely make it a force to be reckoned with. So to answer the beginning question in the opening clip, basically, if you watch the Gale's Greatsword, I kind of did the same thing where I said, is Gale's Greatsword really, deserving of the hype and, the praise and the use that everyone likes to use it and it's so cool and whatever? In my opinion, no, it wasn't. And I outlined some reasons why, and what a perfect time. This guy's also using the Gale's Greatsword versus this Onyx blade, and I'll discuss some of the reasons why in a second. But this weapon definitely does make the Hex character a force to be reckoned with. And what you saw in the beginning here was me miss my running R1. That was kind of a weird position where I ended up behind him. And he got a 2-hit combo on me, and then he hit me again. But what you're going to see here is I'm going to buff my weapon, and it's going to just take me 2 hits to get back into the game. So we get 1 hit there. If I would have followed up with a combo, I would have done some more damage. But we do a thrusting R2 to catch his roll. With the great range of this weapon, we probably would have caught him with a regular greatsword, but if there was more space between us, we would have been able to finish him off regardless because of the range of this weapon, so it's really good for that. We got the same guy again for a second time in a row, and this is where you're really going to see this weapon shine. So this is one of the things that I said was not so good about Gale's Greatsword, was that its weapon art, it's cool, but it's not really as useful. It doesn't have as much utility as you might think. And this guy ends up just spamming R1, and with the Gale's Greatsword, it doesn't have as much range. We end up just outreaching him with our Greatsword, punishing his attacks and finishing him off super easy. You saw at the beginning of that clip, though, he did do a weapon art, missed, and we punished him with the R2, right? The range of that R2, we can keep that distance without fearing an enemy's weapon art, like the Gale's Greatsword weapon art or katana weapon arts, etc., etc. And then we can close the distance and punish attacks with the length of our greatsword. And this is really where this greatsword can, just outclass other weapons. And one final note before we end it off here, the damage. So the weapon art is something that has 100% usage, right? There's no reason every fight you shouldn't be activating that weapon art, because it just adds, I think it's around 120 points of damage. Whereas Gale's Greatsword, as a comparison, the weapon art is very situational. It's not really 100% useful in all situations. It's very conditional where you want to use it. And even then, the utility that it adds isn't nearly as useful as you might think. A weapon art for the combo, yes, can do some good damage, but how hard is it to land that weapon art against a competent player? Probably not the easiest thing in the world. So keep that in mind. Try out this sword if you have a Hex character. It's definitely worth it. But that wraps it up, guys. Stay tuned for more Dark Souls. Quantum is out.